I need you to understand the full scale of what you are watching in these videos before we go a single second further. Because what you are seeing is not just another Middle East conflict clip. What you are seeing is the opening chapter of what military analysts are already calling the most significant American military operation since the Iraq War. And when you understand every layer of what happened, the planning, the targets, the timing, the aftermath, your jaw is going to drop. Let's get into it. Today, we are breaking down footage and commentary covering Operation Epic Fury, the joint U.S. and Israeli military campaign against Iran that began on February 28, 2026. 2 videos, 2 angles of analysis, and between them, we are going to give you the full picture of what the United States has been doing, what targets have been hit, why this operation was launched, what the stated objectives are, and what the verified facts show us so far. Let's start from the very beginning, because this did not come out of nowhere. Section 1. The Road to War. How did we get here? To understand what you're watching in these videos, you need to understand the months of events that led to this moment. Throughout February 2026, 3 rounds of negotiations took place between the United States and Iran. The core elements of disagreement included whether Iran's ballistic missile programs and proxies should be included in any deal, and whether Iran would be able to continue enriching uranium. Talks ultimately stalled without clear consensus, and here is where it gets significant. Just before the strikes began, on February 27, 2026, Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi said a breakthrough had been reached, that Iran had agreed both to never stockpile enriched uranium and to full verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iran had even agreed to irreversibly downgrade its current enriched uranium stockpile, so diplomatic progress was being made. Talks were happening, and yet, on February 28th, the strikes began anyway. On February 28, 2026, U.S. Central Command and Israel launched a massive, coordinated, preemptive military campaign against Iran, codenamed Operation Epic Fury by the United States and Operation Roaring Lion by Israel. The operation marked the most significant U.S. military action in the Middle East since the Iraq War, executed without a formal address to Congress beyond a War Powers notification and a Gang of 8 briefing. President Trump announced the strikes via an 8-minute video on Truth Social at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 in the morning. A Truth Social post. No press conference, no primetime address. That alone tells you something about the speed and secrecy with which this operation was launched. Trump's statement explicitly issued a direct ultimatum to Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps personnel to surrender or face certain death, while claiming no responsibility for targeting Iranian leadership, consistent with an operational division of labor where Israel targeted Iran's leadership and the United States engaged in large-scale capability degradation. That division of labor is crucial to understanding what you are seeing in this footage. 2 militaries, 2 operation names, 1 coordinated campaign. Section 2. The opening strikes. What was hit on day 1? Now let's talk about what actually happened when those first strikes hit, because the scale of this is almost difficult to comprehend. During the first 12 hours of Operation Epic Fury alone, a senior U.S. official confirmed that the United States carried out 900 strikes against Iranian targets. The Israeli military also confirmed that 200 of its jets hit nearly 500 targets in Iran on the first day of the operation. 900 strikes in 12 hours. That is 75 strikes per hour, more than 1 per minute, every minute for half a day straight. Over 1,250 targets were struck within the first 48 hours alone, according to CENTCOM. And by the time we reached day 5 of the operation, U.S. forces had struck nearly 2,000 targets in Iran in total. Now, what were those targets? This is where it gets very specific. The strikes appear to pursue 4 main objectives: degrading Iran's offensive missile capabilities, disrupting logistical and industrial support networks, weakening domestic security forces, and targeting core governmental and intelligence institutions, including facilities linked to the presidential office and the Supreme National Security Council. Among the confirmed U.S. assets used were one-way attack drones, Tomahawk cruise missiles, F/A-18 Super Hornets, and F-35 fighter jets. Think about that weapons list for a second. Tomahawk cruise missiles, F-35 stealth jets, one-way attack. Drones, meaning drones that are designed specifically to be expendable, flying directly into a target and detonating. This was not a limited surgical strike. This was a comprehensive air campaign. Section 3, the assassination of Khamenei, the most significant single strike. Now we have to talk about the single most consequential event of the opening day, something that in normal times would have been a once-in-a-generation geopolitical event on its own. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in the U.S.-Israeli attack. The supreme leader of Iran was in his office at his compound in northern Tehran when he was killed early Sunday morning. Israeli Air Force jets targeted the compound in a precise, large-scale operation based on IDF intelligence. Israeli intelligence had discovered that Khamenei spent quite a lot of time above ground in his offices rather than in his bunker. His routines and whereabouts had been tracked for months by the CIA, which learned that the supreme leader would be meeting in Tehran on Saturday with other top officials. Months of CIA tracking, detailed intelligence on his daily routines, the fact that he was above ground, not in a bunker. This was not a lucky strike. This was a precisely planned assassination. Additional senior officials confirmed to have been killed include Salah Assadi, head of intelligence for Iran's Emergency Command, Mohammad Shirazi, head of the military office of Khamenei, the head of the Organization of Defensive Innovation and Research, Hossein Jabal Amelian, and the former head of that same organization. On March 1st, Iran's Chief of Staff Abdul Rahim Mousavi was also confirmed killed by strikes. So within the first 24 hours of this operation, Iran's supreme leader was dead, along with its chief of staff and multiple heads of intelligence and military organizations. The command and control structure of one of the most heavily fortified regimes in the world had been effectively decapitated. Iran's foreign ministry stated that the military had lost control over several units, which were now operating according to old general instructions. That is an extraordinary admission. Units operating without command, without coordination, without current orders in the middle of an active war. Section 4, Nuclear and Military Infrastructure. What was destroyed? Beyond the leadership strikes, let's look at what was hit on the military and strategic infrastructure side, because this is the core of what these commentary videos are covering, what the United States has actually done to Iran's military capability. Since the beginning of the campaign, Israeli forces alone neutralized approximately 300 Iranian missile launchers and dropped around 4,000 munitions across Iran in continuous waves of strikes targeting the regime's missile and military infrastructure. 300 missile launchers gone. That is the primary delivery mechanism for Iran's long-range strike capability. On the naval side, the U.S. destroyed 11 Iranian naval ships in the Gulf of Oman, according to CENTCOM. Iran's naval headquarters have also been largely destroyed. Iranian Navy submarines were among the targets of the operation. Satellite images showed extensive damage at the Konarak naval base in southern Iran, including a sinking ship and damaged port buildings. And by March 3rd, the numbers had grown further. According to CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper, as of March 3rd, the United States had destroyed 17 Iranian ships, including the most operational Iranian submarine, which now had a hole in its side. Then on March 4th, the naval campaign extended even further afield. The Iranian Navy frigate Iris Dina was sunk in the Indian Ocean by a United States Navy submarine. approximately 40 nautical miles south of Gala, Sri Lanka. The vessel had been transiting back to Iran following its participation in an international fleet review in India. A U.S. submarine tracked an Iranian warship all the way to the Indian Ocean, off the coast of Sri Lanka, and sank it. This war is not contained to the Persian Gulf. It is global in its reach. On the nuclear side, initial reports suggest that targets included the Iran Atomic Energy Agency headquarters in Tehran and the Explosive Research Testing Facility at Parchin, as well as further strikes at the Isfahan nuclear complex. This indicates a shift toward neutralizing Iran's peripheral nuclear capabilities, both civilian and military. And for air defenses, Trump himself told reporters that just about everything's been knocked out, and that Iran had no Navy, Air Force, air detection, or radar left after the attacks. Now, that is a presidential statement, and independent verification of that full claim is still ongoing. But the confirmed target list from CENTCOM and the IDF is consistent with a systematic effort to remove every layer of Iran's ability to defend itself or project power. Section 5. The scale and context. Why this is historic. Let me give you some historical context here because I want you to understand just how unprecedented the scale of this operation is. In recent weeks before the strikes, Washington assembled a large fleet of fighter jets and warships in the region, its most significant military buildup in the Middle East since the Iraq War. That is a benchmark that covers more than 2 decades of military history, and even the Iraq War, which at its peak involved hundreds of thousands of troops, did not open with 900 strikes in 12 hours. The strikes in Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion differ drastically from Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, which consisted of limited strikes against key nuclear targets. This operation, by contrast, is a comprehensive military campaign aimed at capability degradation across every domain: naval, air, missile, intelligence, and leadership. 8 months ago, there was a limited strike operation. Now there is a full campaign. The scope has changed completely. Section 6. Iran's response. Operation True Promise 4. Now, this is a two-sided conflict, and your audience needs to understand Iran's response, because the footage in these videos doesn't exist in a vacuum. Iran hit back. Iran's response has been named Operation True Promise 4, the latest in a series of military actions. Iran launched drones and ballistic missiles at Israel, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. 7 countries. Iran launched strikes at 7 countries simultaneously. During the second day alone, Iran launched roughly 420 missiles across 9 countries and ships at sea. 39%, totaling 162 missiles at Israel, 40%, totaling 167 missiles at the UAE, and 11%, totaling 46 missiles at Qatar. Iran also expanded targeting to commercial shipping. 2 oil tankers, the Palau-flagged Skylight and the Marshall Islands-flagged MKD Vyom, were targeted off the coast of Oman. The regional impact has been enormous. The Qatari Ministry of Defense confirmed that 2 ballistic missiles struck Al Udeid military base, the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. The Qatar Airways grounded all flights. All schools moved to remote learning. Public gatherings for Ramadan were suspended. More than 1 million people were caught in travel chaos as over 1,900 flights were canceled in and out of the Middle East in a single day. And on the economic front, the IRGC announced the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, where Iranian threats to attack ships have brought maritime activity to a virtual standstill. About 20% of the oil consumed worldwide is exported through the strait. As a result of the conflict and higher risk to ships, 150 freight ships, including many oil tankers, are stalled behind the strait. 1/5 of the world's oil supply stalled. This is not just a military story. This is an energy story, a global economy story. Section 7. U.S. Casualties and Human Cost. Now let's talk about the cost. That's because a factual, honest breakdown of this conflict cannot skip over what it has cost in human lives on all sides. 6 U.S. service members were killed in a drone strike on a port in Kuwait. All 6 have been identified and are being remembered for their service. The Pentagon identified 2 of those soldiers as Chief Warrant Officer. 3 Robert M. Marzan, 54, of Sacramento, California, and Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, 45, of Indianola, Iowa. O'Brien died on March 1st in Port Shuaibah, Kuwait, during an unmanned aircraft system attack. Real names, real people, real families. That is the human cost on the American side. On the Iranian side, the United States and Israel have killed at least 1,230 people in Iran since Saturday, according to the latest figures. More than 1,000 people have been killed in Iran. Dozens have died in Lebanon. 11 deaths have been reported in Israel. And there are serious questions being raised about civilian casualties. There is no independent confirmation of exact casualty numbers, but the Washington Post and the New York Times have both verified footage taken immediately after strikes in certain areas. Iran's foreign ministry has accused the U.S. and Israel of strikes on 33 civilian sites across the country, including hospitals, schools, residential areas, the Tehran Grand Bazaar, and the historic Golistan Palace complex. CENTCOM has stated clearly that it does not target civilians, but those questions and the independent investigations are ongoing. Section 8. The political dimension, Congress, allies, and the world. Let's zoom out to the political dimension because this operation is as significant politically as it is militarily. The Senate voted down a war powers resolution that would have forced President Trump to pull back from the war in Iran. The measure, brought by Senator Tim Kaine and Senator Rand Paul, faced steep odds and was largely symbolic. Even if it passed, Trump was almost certain to veto any bill aimed at decreasing his authority to use the military. So Congress has effectively backed the operation, for now. On the international side, the reaction has been deeply divided. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said attacks by the United States and Israel against Iran in the next few hours and days will increase in scope and intensity, describing the U.S. and Israel as the 2 most powerful air forces in the world. But not every ally is on board. Spain refused to allow the U.S. to use its bases for the war. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian commended Spain for this decision. U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to cut off all trade with Spain in response. France also stepped back. French President Emmanuel Macron said that France cannot approve of the strikes being conducted outside of international law, while also stating that Iran bears primary responsibility for the escalation. And the UN's nuclear watchdog directly challenged the stated justification for the operation. The United Nations nuclear watchdog told CNN that Iran was not days or weeks away from having atomic weapons. Trump himself had previously said Tehran's nuclear program was obliterated by U.S. strikes on Iran last summer. U.S. intelligence suggested Iran would need until 2035 to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile if it chose to pursue one. Those are facts that are documented in official intelligence reports and stated directly by the IAEA. Section 9. What comes next? The road ahead. So where does this go from here? What are the verified signals about the trajectory of this conflict? The volume of Iran's missile launches and drone strikes dropped by 86% and 73% respectively since the first day of the war, according to top U.S. General Dan Kane. This suggests Iran's offensive capability is being degraded, but it has not been eliminated. There are growing signs that Kurdish Iranian armed groups have launched a ground offensive in northwest Iran against the Islamic government. U.S. officials have reportedly asked Iraqi Kurds to assist in cross-border military operations, and Kurdish forces in northern Iraq are currently said to be on standby to join the conflict against Iran. On the leadership front, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Iran's late supreme leader, has emerged as a leading contender to take up the country's top post, having spent years cultivating influence within the establishment and forging close ties with the powerful IRGC. Israel warned that any new leader would be an unequivocal target for elimination. And the timeline? President Trump stated that U.S. operations would continue until all of our objectives are achieved, which he suggested could be up to 4 weeks. From the start of the operation on February 28th, that takes us potentially to late March 2026. This is not over, not by a long way. So let me bring it all together. What are these 2 videos actually showing you? They are showing you commentary on the opening act of a conflict that has reshaped the Middle East in less than 1 week. A conflict that has seen the supreme leader of Iran killed, 900 U.S. strikes in 12 hours, nearly 2,000 targets hit in 5 days, Iran's navy effectively destroyed, its missile infrastructure systematically dismantled, its command structure decapitated, and simultaneously 6 American soldiers killed, over 1,000 Iranians dead, 1 million travelers stranded. The Strait of Hormuz, carrying 20% of the world's oil, brought to a standstill. U.S. embassies closed in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Lebanon. Amazon data centers in Bahrain and the UAE knocked offline by Iranian drone strikes. This is the full picture. Not just the military strikes, not just the footage of explosions, but the diplomatic failures that preceded it, the intelligence operations that made it possible, the human cost on all sides, and the global economic consequences that are unfolding in real time. That is what analytical commentary on this conflict looks like. And as long as this operation continues, we will keep breaking it down fact by fact with no agenda and no spin. If this breakdown gave you the full picture, hit that like, subscribe if you're not already, and drop in the comments what aspect of this conflict you want me to go deepest on next, because there is a lot more to unpack. Stay informed, stay sharp, see you in the next one.